Brazilian President Luis Ignacio da Silva arrived in China on an official visit to strengthen bilateral cooperation and to sign new trade agreements. Tens of thousands of junior doctors in England hold a second day of a 4-day strike to demand better payments that cope with rising inflation in the country. An Iranian delegation arrived in Saudi Arabia to pave the way for reopening diplomatic missions as the Gulf nations prepare to normalize relations after a 7-year estrangement. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. The President of Brazil, Luis Ignacio Lula da Silva, arrived on Wednesday in Shanghai in West China, where he will begin a 3-day visit to the Asian giant and will carry out several official activities. Lula's stay in Shanghai includes attending tomorrow the inauguration of his compatriot Dilma Rousseff as head of the new development bank established by the members of the BRICS group, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, to finance infrastructure projects. Lula will then travel to Beijing, and on Friday he will be formally received by his host, Xi Jinping, with whom he will discuss bilateral issues on a proposal to set up a club of mediators in the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, as well as talks with Premier Li Qiang and parliamentary leader Zhao Leiji. We now go with our correspondent in Brazil, Ryan Meir, for more details on President Lula's visit to China.
After a week delay due to a case of bronchial pneumonia, Brazil's President Lula has finally arrived in the city of Shanghai in China, where he was greeted at the airport by former Brazilian President Dilma Rousseff. Tomorrow he's going to go to her official inauguration ceremony as the new president of the New Development Bank, or BRICS Bank as it's commonly called. The Chinese government has expressed satisfaction with Lula's nomination of Rousseff as bank president. The Brazilian delegation is arriving with proposals for 20 bilateral trade agreements, and they hope to move forwards jointly on a variety of problems that the country is facing right now. One of the proposals allegedly will be that a Chinese auto company take over all of the Ford factories that were abandoned in 2021 when President Bolsonaro didn't do anything to stop Ford from leaving the country after 100 years. There's a lot of expectation that Brazil is going to join China's Belt and Road Initiative. This would make Brazil the 22nd country in Latin America to do so. One of the main goals of Lula's visit is to jointly work on a peace proposal, bringing as many other countries as they can into a so-called peace club to try and negotiate an agreement between the governments of Ukraine and Russia. Expectations are high for what promises to be a historic moment in the history of both of these countries.
In Ecuador, 6 inmates were found hanged inside the littoral prison in the coastal city of Guayaquil. Violence in Ecuador's prisons, where drug gangs fight for power, have become a common occurrence. These 6 killings add to the 429 inmates who have been murdered since February 2021. In 2022 alone, 6 massacres were reported. According to official estimates, there are about 35,000 inmates in Ecuador's overcrowded prison system, originally designed for only 30,000. Many of them are members of gangs linked to drug trafficking. A government committee stated in a report issued last year that Ecuadorian prisons can be considered as warehouses of human beings and torture centers. In Honduras, the magistrates of the Constitutional Chamber of the Supreme Court of Justice opened an investigation which involved the wardens of the 4 prisons where occurred shootings between gang members on April 8th. Via social media, the Supreme Court announced that 2 executive judges have been appointed to investigate the incidents, which resulted in 1 inmate dead and 7 others injured. The court has demanded that the prison wardens and the director of the National Penitentiary Institute each submit a report about the incident. The April 8th confrontations involved members of the MS-13 gang, aka Mara Salvatrucha, and the Barrio 18 gang. After the events, President Xiomara Castro announced an intervention plan in 25 Honduran prisons, which she has entrusted to Security Vice Minister Julissa Villanueva. The Supreme Court noted that to this date, no organization, relative, or any other individual linked to the victims has been filed any suit regarding the shooting. On Wednesday, 100 lawmakers from Mexico demanded that President Joe Biden and the U.S. Congress drop charges against Julian Assange and overturn the ongoing extradition proceedings. The senators and deputies said they joined the call for Assange's immediate release by international organizations at the United Nations and other human rights advocates, legal and medical associations. In a letter delivered to the U.S. Embassy in Mexico City, they endorsed the agreement of the Council of Europe, which considers Assange's treatment to be among the most serious threats to freedom of expression. The document supports the European Union Parliament and congressmen from around the world who oppose the extradition of WikiLeaks founder and expressed concern about violations of Assange's fundamental human, civil and political rights principles. The governor of Puerto Rico, Pedro Pierluisi, decreed a state of emergency aimed at implementing measures to mitigate the impact of coastal erosion that is currently affecting the Caribbean island. The measure ordered the Department of Natural and Environmental Resources to execute an action plan with the support of other agencies. It also includes the allocation of $5 million from the U.S. Rescue Plan and another $100 million from the Department of Housing. At the same time, it establishes as a priority scientific research, citizen participation, and assistance to coastal communities to control pollution and promote resilience and sustainability. Puerto Rico has about 1,121 kilometers of coastline, out of which about 37% are beaches and runs through 44 municipalities. Let's take a short break, but first remember you can follow us on TikTok at teleSUR English, in which you'll be able to see news in different formats, news updates, and much more. All the stories coming up. Stay with us. Hello, welcome back. On Wednesday, thousands of junior doctors in England are on the second day of a 4-day strike in pursuit of their campaign for full payment reinstatement. The doctors are at the loggerheads over their 35% pay increase request and the terms of talks between their union and Health Secretary Steve Barclay. So far, there are no talks ongoing between the British Medical Association, the union, and Barclay, despite the expectation that up to 350,000 appointments and operations could be cancelled as a result of the strike. British Medical Association leader Professor Philip Banfield, chairman of the union's council, revealed on Wednesday that he has asked the Advisory Conciliation and Arbitration Service for help in negotiations. The union doctors claim they have twice approached the health secretary in search of a credible offer to call off this week's strike. However, the minister only reiterated that the workers' claim was unreasonable. On Wednesday, U.S. President Joe Biden urged Northern Ireland's warring political leaders to restore power-sharing government while praising the potential for investment and growth 25 years after the historic peace agreement. In a speech at the University of Ulster in Belfast praising the limitless possibilities offered by the United Kingdom-ruled territory, the U.S. President stated that he expects the Northern Ireland Executive and Assembly to restore power-sharing government. The devolved government in Belfast is a key pillar of the 1998 Good Friday Agreement, but collapsed 14 months ago due to the Democratic Unionist Party's fierce opposition to post-Brexit trade deals. President Biden met Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and greeted leaders of Northern Ireland's political parties before delivering his speech at the newly opened University of Ulster campus in central Belfast.
The simple truth is that peace and economic opportunity go together. Peace and economic opportunity go together. In the 25 years since the Good Friday Agreement, Northern Ireland's gross domestic product has literally doubled. And I predict to you, if things continue to move in the right direction, it will more than triple.
On Tuesday, Turkey's presidential candidate Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu addressed the nation in the framework of his electoral campaign for the May 14th elections. As President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's main oppositor, Kılıçdaroğlu promised that his party has the power to solve all the problems of Turkey. The presidential candidate heads the Republican People's Party of modern Turkey's founder Mustafa Kemal Atatürk. For his presidential efforts, he has united 6 opposition parties that include right-wing nationalists and liberals with promises of justice, democracy. In the latest survey, 42.6% of respondents say they would vote for Kılıçdaroğlu and 41.1% for Erdogan in first-round voting. The other candidates received together 7.2% of the support. In Russia, Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov said that the leaks of classified U.S. documents could be a forgery and deliberate disinformation to mislead his country. In response to a question from the press about Moscow's attitude to the situation, Ryabkov said that no position has been determined, as he also considered that these may be forgeries or deliberate disinformation. The senior official underlined that because the U.S. is a party to the conflict and in fact is waging a hybrid war against Russia, such maneuvers are possible to deceive the adversary. However, the Vice Minister claimed that he is not affirming anything and that what happened with the documents could be part of many possible scenarios. Russia is boosting investment in its power industry to meet an increase in demand, brought about by a rise in economic activity. Olesia Slinkov from TV Bricks brings us more on the subject.
Industrial consumers are increasing their use of in-house electricity generation. Additional facilities with a total capacity of 700 megawatts are planned to be built in the Irkutsk region, Transbaikal territory, and Buryatia. The Far East is also actively developing its energy industry. Prospects were discussed at the 5th conference, Russian Power Industry, New Frontiers of Development.
We understand that on the part of consumers and on the part of the regions, there are requests of additional energy and capacity. This applies to the Far East, Siberia and Southern Russia. So we have global projects to build new power plants ahead of us. This includes construction of power generation in southeastern Siberia. In southern Russia, about 500 megawatt is about providing power for the eastern part of Ben Transit and the development of the Far East energy system in general that has a serious growth potential.
New businesses are operating and opening. In January this year, electricity consumption reached an all-time high, which means that the energy system needs to be prepared for further growth in this capacity. Russia has one of the best records for low-carbon energy use.
Approximately 40% of total electricity generation is from low-carbon sources, hydro and nuclear. If we include the share of natural gas in our generation, we would be in the vanguard. There are plans to build hydro and nuclear plants. They will be updated and taken into account in the general scheme of arrangement.
In terms of developing alternative energy in the country, experts are focusing on solar, wind, and small hydropower plants.
Now we are seeing a resurgence and interest from new industrial investors, and next week we are waiting for the results to come in. This is always a plus for the region because the region attracts not only investments, and through this increases the gross regional product indicators. Not only tax revenues but also creates jobs, and by increasing the share of carbon-free green energy on the balance sheet, those investors who are interested in consuming green energy for their own purposes come to the region. So there is a cyclical process that generates additional investment.
As of this year, a new system, a deeply modernized system for advanced planning of electricity is in place. The programs are approved by the Ministry of Energy in the form of a single document, a single plan, played down as before the territorial development schemes, where in each region separately from the federal grid development plan.
This gives synchronization of regional and federal plans, which means that all tasks and problematic issues will be solved more efficiently and faster.
teleSUR English continues to grow. You can now tune in from 33 different African countries through StarSat, dial 461 and enjoy Latin American alternative broadcasts. One final short break and we'll be right back. Don't go away. Welcome back. The United States and Philippines Marines participated in bilateral weapons familiarization as part of joint annual military exercises named Balikatan, or shoulder to shoulder in Filipino. Nearly 80,000 troops are taking part in the largest joint exercises in the region, which for the first time included a live-fire drill in the South China Sea. Likewise, in talks in Washington with their Philippine counterparts, Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin discussed a deal reached last week for U.S. forces to use a growing number of bases in the Asian country, including one near Taiwan. In this sense, Wang Wenbin, spokesman for the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs, stated his nation's concern and dissatisfaction with the newly added use of military bases by the U.S. in the Philippines, while highlighting China's indisputable sovereignty of the South China Sea islands and their adjacent waters.
China is gravely concerned over and strongly dissatisfied with the joint statement issued by the United States and the Philippines. China has indisputable sovereignty over the South China Sea island and their adjacent waters. The United States-Philippines statement distorts and vilifies China's legitimate and lawful maritime law enforcement activities, even making groundless slander against China, which China resolutely opposes. Regarding the newly added use of military bases by the United States in the Philippines, China has repeatedly stated its position. As the Chinese saying goes, facts speak louder than words. The size of the bases in the Philippines that the United States military has newly gained access to already have laid bare the United States' intention.
On Wednesday, an Iranian delegation arrived in Saudi Arabia to pave the way for reopening diplomatic missions as the Gulf nations prepare to normalize relations after the 7-year split. The visit came just days after the Saudi delegation made a similar visit to Iran on the heels of a historic meeting in China between the two governments' foreign ministers who vowed to bring stability to the region. Iran's official IRNA news agency reported that one team is to travel to Jeddah to prepare for the reopening of Iran's consulate there and its representation in the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, while the other will remain in Riyadh to reopen the embassy. Iran's President Ibrahim Raisi has been invited to Saudi Arabia, according to Tehran, in what will be the first visit of its kind since Mohammad Khatami went in 1999. Prime Minister of Israel Benjamin Netanyahu on Tuesday decreed an unprecedented prohibition that states the Jews will be allowed to enter the Al-Aqsa Mosque until the end of Ramadan. The decision of the Israel premier was notified after heavy clashes between the occupying troops and the Palestinian rebels, and after the forceful declarations of the leaders of Hezbollah and Hamas from Lebanon. The Palestinian Islamic Jihad movement also warned Tel Aviv against any aggression against the Palestinian people, promising a forceful response. Since the beginning of Ramadan, the Muslim holy month, hundreds of Israeli settlers have attacked and violated the Al-Aqsa Mosque, one of the holiest Islamic sites in the world. The death toll after airstrikes by Myanmar's military rose to 100 people on Wednesday. The attack targeted a village in the northwestern Sagaing region. Witnesses report that the airstrike happened as hundreds of people gathered in Pasigi village to celebrate the opening of a local administration office where tea and food were offered. Local authorities said the numbers of those killed could definitely increase as the bodies were being collected, among them many children and women. Meanwhile, United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres condemned the attack, called for the protection of civilians and for those responsible to be held accountable. The military junta is increasingly using airstrikes to counter a widespread armed struggle against its rule, which began in February 2021 when it seized power from the elected government of Aung San Suu Kyi. We have come to the end of this news briefing. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net, and you can also join us on our social medias on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.